powered by geothermal, but it is a resource that is almost completely untapped. Bringing solar in the world, in our country, we power our entire nation from solar energy. We have the greatest wind resources on earth. The Midwest and the prairie states are the Saudi Arabia of wind. North Dakota is the windiest place on earth at sea level. We have enough wind in North Dakota, Montana, and Texas to provide 100% of the energy needs of our country, even if every American owned an electric car. We have an administration now that is determined to harness these new currents of energy. And the Obama administration is going to abolish the direct subsidies to carbon, but they're also trying to pass the Waxman-Markey bill, which is going to finally put a price on carbon emissions and dim a little bit at least the huge unfair market advantage that's given to carbon. And that's all we need. We don't need to even a level playing field. We just need a playing field that is vaguely level, because we will beat them at their own game if we can play them even with one hand on the back. My home not only has geothermal, but it has two kinds of solar. Solar thermal plant that heats all the water, and I have solar panels on my roof that create huge amounts of electricity. My house, all day long, is producing more energy than we can use. A marketplace, I love free market capitalism. We don't know what it is in this country because we don't have that system, particularly in this country. The things that the Obama administration is challenged with is to rationalize the rules that govern our marketplace so that they serve the public interest. And one of the great things this president has done is that he kind of quietly attached a little provision to the stimulus package that virtually nobody knows about, which says that any governor who accepts stimulus money has to make a pledge that he will use his best efforts to decouple the energy systems in his state. So I've talked to about 6 governors in the last week, and not one of them knew that they had signed this thing. A marketplace that does what markets are supposed to do, which is to reward good behavior, which is efficiency, and to punish bad behavior, which is inefficiency and waste. Right now, we have a marketplace that is governed by irrational rules that favor, the dirtiest, filthiest, most poisonous, most destructive, most addictive fuels from hell, rather than the cheap, clean, green, wholesome, safe, and local fuels from heaven. And we want to change that around. We want a marketplace that will turn every American into an energy entrepreneur, and every home into a power plant, like mine is, and power our country based upon American entrepreneurship and energy and efficiency and initiative and imagination, what Franklin Roosevelt said, American industrial genius, rather than Saudi oil. And we can do that. We have the capacity to do it in our country. All we need to do is establish these, a marketplace that will do it. I'm on the board of one of the biggest green tech venture capital firms, and it is the biggest in the world. It's called ManagePoint, and it's extremely profitable, even in the current atmosphere. And it has about 35 portfolio companies, mainly doing energy efficiency and cleaning up water and this kind of stuff. 5 or 10 times faster than you'd ever build a nuke plant. And the cost of it is the same as building a coal plant per gigawatt. The cost of building is about 1/3 the cost of building a nuke plant. But once we build it, the energy is free forever. Because the photons are hitting the earth for free every day. All we have to do is pick them up and put them in the line once you build that infrastructure. Once you build that coal plant for $3 billion a gigawatt, now your big costs are starting, because now you have to cut down the Appalachian Mountains and ship them across the country in rail cars, and then burn them and poison every lake in America. Once you build a oil plant, you have to now go over to Saudi Arabia, punch holes in the ground, bring up the oil, refine it expensively. You have to genuflect these sheiks who hate democracy or despised by their own people, who we should have nothing to do with, and that's a cost to our country. And to ship across the Atlantic Ocean with military escorts, and you have to spill it all over Alaska and the East Coast on the beaches, and burn it and poison everybody. And so those costs of oil, just start after you build that plant. But when you build our plant, it's free energy forever. once you invest in the infrastructure, now I'll tell you some math, okay, for those of you, for the math teachers here who can do this in your head. We use 1,000 gigawatts, that's our daily demand in our country. About 500 of those gigawatts are carbon-based. The rest are from nuke and from hydro and other sources. We can decarbonize our energy system for a cost, if it's $3 billion a gigawatt, and we need to get rid of 500, we can decarbonize today's system for about $1.5 trillion. That's about a half to a third of the cost of the war in Iraq. And once you do it, you have free energy forever, for every American. And think about what that will do. And we've done this before. We did it with the ARPANET grid in 1979, when we built the ARPANET grid, which was a national grid. The federal government built it to connect every American home to the internet. A year later, there were fewer than 500 computer networks in our country in 1980, fewer than 500 computer networks. And IBM said PCs, public personal computers, were data technology. Okay, so now most of us have personal computers, and what happened to the cost of information, of bits and bytes? It plummeted to almost zero. And that's exactly what will happen to the cost of electrons as soon as we build a national marketplace for energy. President Roosevelt had this extraordinary stimulus package for our country that kept people in their jobs, kept people in their homes, kept millions of Americans from starving to death, and kept them on their farms. But it had not been big enough to prompt a national market recovery where the local entrepreneurs and businesses could sustain on their own. And then we had World War II, and Roosevelt gave this famous speech to our country where he said, in 1940, he said, we're going to build 50,000 airplanes a year. He later admitted that he had taken that figure out of thin air. The year before, we had built 2,800 aircraft in our country. And he said, next year we're going to build 50,000. He said, we're going to build 25,000 tanks. We're going to build a ship a day. We're going to build a battleship a month. We're going to build an aircraft carrier every 3 months until this war is over and won. And people ridiculed it. They said, no industrial mobilization of this scale has ever happened in human history. But he went to Detroit and he said to the automakers, you're not making cars anymore. You're making planes, you're making tanks, you're making half-tracks, amphibious vehicles, bombs and detonators. And within 6 weeks, they had retooled their factories. Within 6 months, we had met his goals. Within 12 months, we had surpassed them. The following year, we built 96,000 aircraft in this country. So we had a president who mobilized the technological and scientific ability of our people and get it moving towards that goal. And we had a stock market recovery then that exploded, and that was sustained for generations and made us the richest country in the world. Then we were building stranded assets. We were building tanks and planes and bombs that were sent over to Europe to be blown up. And there was no lasting benefit to our country or to our economy from the creation of those things. Obama's plan was to build something, an infrastructure in our country that will create prosperity for generations. Pylons across the country, employ thousands of teams to construct pylons, to build new wire systems across the country to transport energy that can do long-haul transmissions, create turbines and erect them on every farm in the Dakotas and the Midwest, every farm that wants them, to create, to employ teams of millions of men and women to bulb solar voltaic cells on every roof in America that has a southern exposure, to other teams that go into every home, pressure test and do electronic audits, and then blow insulation. And in the end, we will have a marketplace in our country where energy, the cost of energy goes to basically zero. And that will be the biggest tax break that any industry ever had. Because